Huawei came out with a new phone and is being touted as a sign that China broke US sanctions on semiconductors. Is it really a breakthrough or something fishy is going on? Welcome to China Insider, I'm David Zhang. Now, after 3 years of silence, Huawei came out with a new phone on the same day that US Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo is in Beijing. And this has gotten pro-CCP propagandists hyped over the potential that the CCP no longer is afraid of the US chip sanctions. Now, back in July, reports already signaled that Huawei was working on a 5G phone. They've been stuck on 4G for a very long time, a few years. But is it really true that China has done it, that they will dominate the world of semiconductors? It's unlikely. This new Huawei Mate 60 Pro is a $900 phone that has a 7nm chip, and it's powered by a new Kirin 9000S chip that has been fabricated in China by the Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corps, or SMIC. Now, SMIC is China's premier chip foundry, which is a state-owned company that manufactures computer chips. And this is according to a teardown of the handset that Tech Insights conducted for Bloomberg News. Now, why is 7nm important? It's important because the US sanction limits who can sell to China and what kind of equipment. Now, China currently only has equipment that can produce 7nm or bigger. And China also has the capability to produce up to 10nm chips domestically, but smaller than that, 7nm was considered the bottleneck. Specifically for Huawei, since at least 2020, they've been blacklisted by the US Commerce Department, and as well as last year, the Biden administration further restrict China's access to chip equipment and technology with the CHIPS Act. And against this background, the news that Huawei's new phone has a 7nm chip seems amazing on paper. But I'm here to tell you all the details as to why this isn't some overachievement that the CCP has, but rather it's another propaganda, self-satisfying victory lap, another information warfare. In fact, I believe Huawei has successfully packaged itself as a winner and in turn making the CCP the winner as well. And this year, a news report says that Huawei is likely using SMIC, which is China's, again, state-owned chip producers, N+1 process. And that matches around the 7nm technology used by TSMC, which is Taiwan's Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation. Now, Tech Insights, the Canadian-based company specializing in semiconductor analysis, says that SMIC last year already made crypto mining chips for Minerva using the N+1 process. Now, what N+1 is really about, it's basically taking existing machines and tweaking them. In fact, the existing machines that China has, they all come from one company called ASML, which is a Dutch company. A little bit more on that later. Now, Tech Insight revealed that Huawei's Mate 60 Pro is using the newer N+2 technology. In other words, the CCP claims to have found a breakthrough in which that the US sanction barrier is going to be bypassed, allowing China to use existing machines to manufacture chips. And this is done through SMIC, which is potentially using domestic manufacturing, and that's reducing the ability of American technology reliance. Now, the potential is that in the future, they could technically make domestic 5nm or even 3nm. But is it possible, though? What the Chinese Communist Party and the Huawei technology doesn't tell you is that SMIC, though they have all the equipment from ASML, what is confirmed now is that the newer chips made in Huawei phones, they are using the older DUV machines from ASML. So it's not like they manufactured them with domestically created machines. To understand chips, let's do a quick summary of the terms. Right now, SMIC and many other foundries in China, they use something called DUV machines to make the chips. Now, they're supplied by a few companies in the world. ASML being the most famous one, it's based in the Netherlands. Now, DUV stands for deep ultraviolet, and it's capable of making 7nm chips. However, the process is not as efficient. Why? Because newer chips are made using EUV machines, something China doesn't have access to. Now, EUV stands for extreme ultraviolet, and EUV machines are only made by ASML. So not only is EUV more efficient economically, it is also producing smaller sized chips, right? 3nm or 5nm. So the only way that China can get its hands on EUV is if the United States tells ASML that it can sell to China. Otherwise, China will only continue to work with the existing DUV machines. So given that ASML is working with the US on this, what I think happened is the US granted a special license to sell the chips to China. And they cannot simply have it without the license granting them the access, whether that's producing or manufacturing it domestically. And so the only way in which SMC can do this without getting further sanctions is by, again, granted the license that which offers them the ability to produce. Now, remember, Huawei has been blacklisted since 2020. Any company that tries to sell it to Huawei, even if they're a Chinese company, can still be sanctioned by the United States. So what people have been telling me is that DUV machines can basically be tweaked a little bit to make the 7nm chips. The technology is there. It's just that the production yield is much lower and the economic cost is much higher. Now, Gina Raimondo recently told NBC that the US will absolutely not sell China cutting-edge semiconductor chips, but will continue exporting, quote, billions of dollars of less sophisticated American chips. This is an indication that the CCP asked for a license from the US to make the 7nm. Of course, the CCP will never publicly admit that they begged the United States to give them a license. In fact, the CCP will actually tell the US not to publicly declare this either, and of course, under the guise of diplomacy. So the US always falls for this. And then what happens is the Chinese Communist Party goes around and tout their achievement like they're doing now. And this could have been a part of that exchange between Blinken and the other Biden officials going to China as part of that thawing of relations with the CCP. And it seems that is one of those prerequisites or gift packages is China asking the Commerce Department to authorize SMIC to manufacture for Huawei. Now, of course, this isn't really just giving up control or, giving up the cutting edge technologies. It's just some older processes. And it's in exchange for some breathing room for the US-China relationship. And some signs do tell us they actually have done this. Now, prior to Gina Raimondo's visit, Li Qiang, China's premier, had actually publicly said that they're asking the US to reduce its restrictions on China, particularly in the semiconductor field. But it has since been reported that Raimondo rejected this. Combining the information we just covered, what seems to happen is that they came to an agreement where less cutting-edge chips, perhaps the 7nm, can be exported to China, or even the technology, as long as the cutting-edge ones are not being exported to China. And if China was truly ready to make chips domestically on such a large scale, think about it. Why would they cave on a request to the United States? And if anything, this tells us that the most important aspect of this new Cold War, which is the chips war, China's losing it. Otherwise, the alternative is if they have chips somehow stored prior to the blacklisting back in 2020 for Huawei, and they're now using that storage. But it doesn't seem to make sense. Now, China has also announced that they're purchasing a large order from Boeing for the 737 MAX 8 planes. And this is, again, another sign that the CCP has caved, because they have absolutely abandoned their so-called domestic product, which is the C919 plane. As you know, that plane itself is created, it's a Frankenstein of foreign parts. Either way, what we're seeing now is China is really on the survival line for chips. And a little bit more on the Huawei's new phone, or the new chip. They currently don't have, like I said, the domestic machines to make the 7nm chips. So without the technology, China would have to spend 10, 20, 30 years to research how to do it themselves, which isn't something possible. We can see, 3 to 5 years just to make a new phone. And it's very suspicious why. It would be too careless for Huawei or SMIC to do this for just one particular device, right? Only to be sanctioned after. Did they not have any preparation if that was going to be the case? Also, think about 7nm isn't some breakthrough. As big as the propagandists are making it out to be, at least. 7nm manufacturing, there are processes which are, again, feasible with the DUV machines, which TSMC has shown to be possible in 2017. So this is 5-6 years old technology. And these machines can still be exported from ASML to SMIC until at least 2024. So it would be more impressive if we saw a Chinese chip vendor making it using a domestic machine alternative to that of the ASML machines. And until they can do that domestically, this isn't really some big success or achievement. What they're making this whole event sort of very suspicious to me is that Huawei's done virtually no marketing on this new phone. It was released on the same day as Raimondo's visit, but immediately sold out in China. Now, you can argue that it's the first domestic flagship phone in 3 years, and it carries significant political meanings, but from the logical deduction of the current chip war, it seems that they produced a much lower yield, which means the cost of production is very high. And it was sold out, again, because of popularity, but it doesn't mean that the inventory was high to begin with. which again is also a question in itself. Now, Huawei's phone had to be released on the same day that Raimondo was set to meet Li Qiang, right? So the CCP does this all the time. It feels more like a narrative play rather than an official release. Again, if they had waited till the end of the year, perhaps the inventory could have been higher. But thinking back to it, if an iPhone 15 release was done the same day that some Chinese official came to the US, it wouldn't mean much more compared to one that is set to release after a whole public event. So that's not how you do a flagship launch. And again, that's a first for Huawei to just secretly do it. Now, as a tech company, why would Huawei not make such a big deal about its phone's internal specs? In China, the promotion for Huawei's new phone is very minimal. The people that are hyping up this phone are actually the media and individual bloggers. So what officially is being done is very minimal. And again, like we said, the 7nm chip technology is of the past. It's a 2017, 2018 stuff, right? Apple is already buying up 3nm chips for the newest iPhones from TSMC. So going past 7nm is going to be the big challenge because, like I said, it requires the EUV machines, which is not going to be sold to China. And this is going to tell us something. Right now, there's a huge gap between those countries that have access to EUV machines versus the ones that don't. And that's going to be the bigger indicator going forward. China could be very well stuck on the 7nm forever. But one thing we have to watch for is that many different applications for chips, including missiles, they don't use the cutting edge chips. But again, the end goal for China is to win the Cold War, and chip technology and the advancement of it is one of the big indicators of who's winning. So as I said, this is a propaganda victory lap. Are they really just trying to do a one-off? I mean, unless they have completely overcome the technical difficulties. Otherwise, there seems to be selling out SMIC to be sanctioned. Well, we'll never know the full answer from China, but the exchange, it's interesting. And this is, it's done some stuff about the Chinese economy, right? What could have been done with all those policies on the stock market or the policies about the real estate, Huawei's new phone launch has been able to pull the stock market up, which seems to be a good thing for the CCP for now. But in the end, I don't think this is a breakthrough. All right, that's it today for the episode on Huawei's new phone, the Mate 60 Pro, why it's not some big, major, ground-shaking happening event for China's chip industry, but rather it's a propaganda device. All right, that's it for today's China Insider. If you enjoyed the content, leave a like, comment below your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. As always, thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.